economic development, and resiliency in public health, equity, and livability.
I think we might have had an audio issue. Are folks able to hear us right now?
Yeah.
Okay, I just got some responses, so no, sorry about that. Somehow we were muted inside.
Okay. Should we back up then?
Yeah.
Let's back up really quickly. Most of the stuff is things you all know. We can go on to the next slide, Nicole. Thanks. So again, Cami Peterson here at MAPC. Thanks for joining us for our Codes for Climate webinar on how to vote on the IECC. This is the map of the MAPC region. We're a regional planning agency serving the 101 cities and towns in Metro Boston. Our clean energy work focuses both regionally and one-on-one with cities and towns on a multitude of clean energy and climate mitigation and resiliency planning, programs, and policy. We provide a lot of technical assistance as well, including in this work on codes for climate and working to decarbonize our building sector. This is our agenda for today. And we really see this work as part of our net zero holistic framework for climate planning. So we are trying to bring net zero to our 101 cities and towns, and we really think that through this holistic framework, we can generate multi-benefit outcomes in a multitude of sectors. So you've seen this slide before, and I think our presenters are going to show it to you again later as well, but it's because it's such a great infographic. So this is by the Midwest Energy Efficiency Alliance, and it really just goes to show the many ways that an energy code is a life safety code, that it improves our buildings, our homes, not just by reducing greenhouse gas emissions or providing energy savings and cost savings, but in many, many ways that improve our quality of life, our resilience, and our public health. And we really focus on this for all of those benefits, as well as for how important we see the building sector as part of our efforts to mitigate climate change. So you've seen these pie charts before, but they just represent the outsized impact that our buildings have on our greenhouse gas emissions. In the work over the years, we've been working with the Energy Efficient Codes Coalition, and we have presenters for you all from EECC that will present a little later in this webinar. So thankful to have Bill and Maria joining us again. This is a slide that they put together that really shows the improvements from the International Energy Conservation Code, which is our nationwide model energy code. It's adopted by many states throughout the country, and which forms the basis of Massachusetts State Building Code. This is the building energy code for all of our cities and towns unless they've opted into the stretch code. That is 3/4 of the cities and towns here in Massachusetts, but even for those, the stretch code still mainly follows this International Energy Conservation Code with DOER assisted amendments that improve the efficiency of the code, as well as, and that's true for all base code communities as well, and then the stretch code adds a few additional efficiency measures, especially for large commercial buildings. So most of us throughout the state, excuse me, are really affected heavily by this International Energy Conservation Code. And you can see how in the years, and I know our friends at EECC will talk through this as well, we've had some really minimal improvements the last couple of cycles, and we're looking to have a much bigger improvement this cycle with all of your help. So what are the next steps in the IECC code cycle? I'm going to turn it to my colleague, Nicole Sanchez, to kind of walk us through where we are in the timeline, what that voting window looks like, and how you can get into the voting portal and cast your votes.
Thank you. So this is the code cycle so far as you probably know it. So we had 3 phases in municipal engagement in Massachusetts, and we're finally at or just about to be at the voting window for the online voting. So we're really excited about that. And now we know what that window is. So it's going to start on November 18th, so next Monday, and then go until December 5th. So it'll be 3 weeks instead of the 2 weeks that we were anticipating, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. And then on the other side of things, this is what's sort of been going on in the background to get those code proposals from the committee action hearings to the online vote. So there were committee action hearings in the spring. Code proposals were submitted and reviewed, and then there were public comments made. Then just last month, there were the public comment hearings and some in-person voting in Las Vegas in the end of October. And so the results of those votes, you'll see those on the online vote, and your votes that are submitted online will be added to those votes that were done in person. So the online voting window is the next thing that we're looking forward to, and again, that's November 18th to December 5th. So we also found out about the results of all the hard work that you've been doing, getting through the different requirements for being eligible to vote. So when we initially looked at this code cycle about a year ago, we had a target of looking to get out the vote to about 400 additional votes nationwide. Instead, Massachusetts has really blown that goal out of the water. So we have 520 municipal voters in the state who are eligible to vote on this code cycle, which is really exciting. So the voting window is 3 weeks in part because it covers Thanksgiving, and so I wanted to show this in the calendar view to make that a little clearer, that you have this full week from the 18th to the 22nd, and most of the first week in December, but the week leading up to Thanksgiving might be a little bit difficult for folks to vote during because of Thanksgiving. And we're going to have an in-person workshop on the 21st in Newton, and we'll tell you a little bit more about that, but you're welcome to join us there. So let's talk about how to actually vote on the 2021 Iecc. So the things that you'll need to have with you to be able to vote are at least a computer with an internet connection, at least about 40 to 60 minutes to sit down and actually vote. You'll probably need a voter guide, and we have some that we'll be talking to you about. There are two comprehensive voter guides, one on residential and one on commercial from Iecc, and they'll be talking more about the details of that. And then you'll also need your username, password, and PIN to get into the CDP Access portal. So I'm going to tell you about how to make sure you have that username and password and can log in. And then if you're looking for more information, there's this voting tutorial that the Iecc put together as well on how to vote in the CDP Access portal. It is fairly long, it's about an hour, so and giving you the shorter version of that. So this is, if you're just logging in, or if you're a primary representative and you're walking some of your voters through getting a login, you can start on the iecc.org on that Iecc general website, and you would go to log in at this top corner. From there you can go to My Iecc, and that username and password would be the same that you would log into CDP Access with. And you can access CDP Access directly from the Iecc portal, or you can go to cdpaccess.com. And so if you already have a username and password that's working for you on the Iecc site, you should directly use that same login here. And if you don't have a username or password, you should make sure that your email address that you're using to sign up is the same one that your primary representative put in your voter validation. So if you're not sure what that is, you can confirm with them. You may have also gotten an email directly from Iecc with your username and a link to get started. But if not, go to the Iecc website first and sign in there. So once you have that, you want to test out your login to CDP Access, and all of this we want to get folks started with before you're actually sitting down to vote, just to save some time on the day of. So you'd use that same email address and your password and a little math challenge to log in. If you're really having trouble with a PIN, especially if you've made a PIN before and have a login from the past and aren't sure what that is, you can use this website to look up your PIN, but if you're making it for the first time, you should go through that other process through the Iecc website first. So once you've gone through that trial and made sure you can actually get into CDP Access, then during that voting window, so from November 18th to December 5th, at any point during that window or multiple times, you can go in to vote. So here are the steps to do that. You want to first log into CDP Access, and for that you'll need your username and password, your PIN, and you might need the date of birth that you entered in your account on Iecc. Then you want to navigate to the online vote, and once that voting window opens, that should be on that first page once you log into CDP Access. Then from there, you want to locate the code proposals that you're interested in voting on. And so these are going to be organized into two categories for the most part. So it'll start with residential code proposals and then have commercial code proposals for the International Energy Conservation Code. And then in those two categories, the proposals will be in numerical order, and that order is loosely based on where those changes would appear in the code itself. So that the first codes up might not be the ones that you're necessarily interested in. You can vote on everything or just the ones that you're interested in, and if you want to search for individual proposals, you can use the search function and search for those one by one. Then you want to make sure that you save your progress in your vote and make sure that you're submitting your vote during that window. And then I'll show you how to go back in and check that your vote is in the CDP Access portal. So you'll have that voting guide with you as well. And I wanted to give a little bit of decoding for what this means. And this goes back to that process of going through the committee and then the public comment hearings, which is the PCH on Ieccc's voting guide. And then we have the vote recommendation here. So if a lot of these, this letter code tells you which version of the proposal has actually gone through these different steps, and you're interested in what the last version was, and then which version is recommended for the online vote. So you'll have two options, one to adopt it as it went through the public comment hearings, and one to disapprove. So the other important thing to look at in the voting guide is the proposal numbers. So this shows you that it's the residential proposal and then the number afterwards. So that'll show you the order that'll appear on the website. And Bill and Maria will be talking a little bit later in more detail about this voting guide. So I don't want to confuse you too much with this, but just a key if you're looking for what do these letters stand for in the voting guide. So when you go into CDP Access, and you can do this before you start the vote, you can go into the current cycle and just look at some of the proposals that are in there if you want to familiarize yourself with how those proposals are ordered in the site. And this is what that CDP Access portal looks like. And then if you go into your own account in that CDP Access portal, you should have these two parts. So you can see that I am not eligible to vote, obviously, but you should be able to check that you are eligible to vote before the vote. And you, once you have submitted a vote, you can click on My Votes to just double check and verify once you're finished in there.
Thanks, Nicole. So we're going to move on now to discussing the voter guide and code proposals to look for. So I just want to take a minute first to recognize the coalition of partners that we've been working with over the close to 2 years now effort to prepare voters and get them registered and validated and now ready to vote on the 2021 IECC. So here in Massachusetts, we've been working with the Mass Climate Action Network, the Sierra Club, the Northeast Energy Efficiency Partnership, and as mentioned, nationally with the Energy Efficient Codes Coalition, and then by virtue of them with many of their national partners, and you'll hear more about that in a second. I also want to frame the upcoming slides just with a note that we are so privileged to have the voting guides that have been put together by EECC and their partners that you'll hear about. We will be working, and I know I've had questions from a number of stakeholders about this, so just wanted to kind of say this up front. We will be working with our local partners to make sure that the voting guide that we share with all of you is consistent among us partners, so that it's clear and not confusing for the voters that are working with us here in Massachusetts, as well as if there's any kind of localized changes or adjustments that we want to make to that voting guide so that it is clear for Massachusetts voters how they should be voting. That will be consistent in the voting guide that we share with all of you in the coming days. So more to come on that, but the national voting guides that Maria and Bill can speak to next will be the guiding light for all of us as we consider those, and we'll be sure to come out with our localized voting guide in the days very soon ahead. Now I'll turn it to, I think, Maria first and then Bill, but whichever one of you is going to jump in next, we'll move on to your slides. Oh, sorry. And then, okay, sorry, Nicole, if you can go on to Bill and Maria's slides. Sorry for some technical difficulties here on our end. Maybe it's 2 slides forward.
I'm worried about it missing.
Okay, sorry about that. Now moving on, like we said, to Bill and Maria. On to you guys, thanks.
Okay, thanks. Bill, I think you might be muted. I think Bill was going to go first.
I'm muted? Oh, I am muted.
There you go. There you go.
Nope, you're all set. Go on ahead.
First of all, I want to apologize. One of the reasons that our slides were so late, we're trying to get the voting guide finished, and we have so many different players in EECC. It's one of the most broad-based organizations around, and we have the best technical team in the world. They're just phenomenal, and so it took a little while, but we're done, and I'm just thrilled to answer any questions you guys might have about the voting guide that we're doing and how it relates to DOER's recommendations and other things. We had a long talk with them yesterday, and they're going ahead. But before we do this, I want to first talk about a couple of things. First, this group is an amazing group in Massachusetts. We started out, and the reason that what you're about to hear about started in 2016. 3 years ago, we worked with MAPC to try to do the same thing. What we were trying to do is increase the number of online voting. It was the first time that the IECC, the America's Model Energy Code, had ever been voted on online. And so this was a new experience for us. And so we did I think a great job of signing people up. But we also learned a lot, because when it really came down to it, we couldn't get the number of votes that were needed to pass pro-efficiency recommendations. We were able to defeat all the rollback things, and so what we ended up with, once everything had ended, was a 2018 IECC that was barely better than the 2015, if at all, and we did a lot of thinking about this. And the first meeting I had with MAPC was, and the team in Boston was at USGBC in I think 2017. And we really kind of started thinking about how we would do this. And I think the key thing came down to actually getting people to vote and making it easy for them to vote, and trying to make it a much easier process for them. So there were a number of things that we realized we needed to have this time around that we didn't have last time around, and MAPC has kind of been our poster child of how to do this. So we got a great team on the ground, and when I think it was Cammie that said that we blew that Massachusetts blew our national goal out of the water. It's true. We figured out that we needed about 400 votes nationwide in order to win the pro-efficiency proposals, in addition to defeating the rollback proposals. And so we're thrilled to see 550 voters from GMBRs from Massachusetts. And you know, Honolulu, the mayor of Honolulu was so excited. He said last time we cast 3 votes for the 2018 IECC. This time we have 84 just in Honolulu, but the state of Hawaii has more as well, and we're seeing that nationwide. So let's go to the next slide. And what I want to talk about is the 30,000-foot level. So let's go to the next slide, because why we're here is because of this recognition. This is a very technical process. I've often called it the most public secret that America has. It's a very democratic process, but very few people know about it. We had one mayor one time, you know, that actually said, looked at the mayors in the room and said, how many of you knew that America's Model Energy Code was renewed every 3 years? Nobody did. Mayor Bloomberg was in the audience. There were other mayors as well. And then he said, how many of you knew, like Bill just told you, that it's your employees that vote on America's Model Energy Code? And that's really what got the U.S. Conference of Mayors engaged in this. They realized that they could write a key component of national energy policy, buildings, and if they just simply got organized to do that. And so when you take a look at what we're looking at here is not only the chart that you saw earlier about, you know, the tremendous gains that we made in the 2009 and the 2012 IECC, and then there was a flat line from the 2015 to the 2018, and our goal is to start this back down on a glide path of steady gains to net zero buildings in America, starting this time with a 10% boost in efficiency. But we're talking about the elephant in the room in national energy policy when we talk about buildings. It's about 40% of all U.S. energy and 71% of all of its electricity. And improving building efficiency has tremendous benefits. Not only does it put a lot of money in the wallets of the people that own and occupy the buildings, but it also reduces carbon emissions, it stabilizes grids and other things. So this is a big issue, and it's something that you have the ability to write if you're just involved. So next slide. And this is really putting it into numbers. You know, we know that if EECC and its our supporters' proposals are adopted, that we're going to be able to reduce 50 million metric tons in 2030. And then those gains are going to continue because a lot of the improvements that we make in building energy efficiency last the entire 100 years that building's up. And so you understand why it's important to build buildings right now, correct now, because if we don't, they're going to be around for 100 years. It's hard and expensive to retrofit them. But here's an opportunity right now. If we pass the agenda that the proposals that Maria's about to describe to you, we're going to have a 50 million ton reduction metric ton reduction in carbon emissions. Next slide. So now, just as we get into the weeds, I want to introduce Maria Ellingson because she has really been an outstanding part of EECC, not only organizing and working with MAPC and with organizations around the country, but also testifying along with Nicole Sanchez in Las Vegas. This is what I call the sausage factory. It's not a pretty sight, but it certainly is and it's very technical. But it's just this, we talked about the impact. Now let's go into the weeds and start talking about the individual proposals. So I'll turn it over to Maria.
Thanks, Bill. We can go on to the next slide. I don't know how the font got so messed up on these slides, but I think Nicole has covered most of this. This is just to say that at the committee action hearings in Albuquerque, what happened there is impacting the rest of the voting. So it's impacting us and you as you go to vote, because whether the committee decided to adopt or oppose each proposal that came before them, if they decided to adopt it, then it went into what's called the consent agenda, and as long as there were no further public comments after that committee action hearing, that just goes directly into the code. So we won't be looking at that, and that's why when you look at the voter's guide, you'll see that there's a bunch of skipped numbers. It doesn't go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It just kind of skips because some of the proposals that originally were submitted in January have been removed, and some have gone onto the consent agenda and are going to be going into the code. So what's left, what we're going to be doing next, the very bottom arrow there where it says need to assure that GMVRs vote. This is what's critical, is that the ones that are remaining and the ones that have great energy saving potential are voted into the code, and that the ones that roll back the code and actually reduce energy efficiency are defeated. And based on what that committee action hearing results were back in April 28th there on this graph or slide, we either need to get 2/3 majority to overturn what the committee said. So if the committee said, we like this, but then, we realize, no, we actually don't like that because that's going to impact energy efficiency, then we have to get 2/3 majority to overturn what they said. And, but if we agree with them, then we just need a simple majority. So as you go into voting, you'll see that. And you don't have to know that. That's a little technical, like Bill said, in the weeds. You don't really have to know that, but just so you know for background, that's why you might see needs 2/3 or needs a simple majority. We can go to the next slide. Okay, we can go to the next slide because we already talked about this too. That was just to kind of set the stage for, now we're going to talk about, what's actually you're going to be voting on, and it's the specific parts of the code. So like that house image showed, and what this slide here shows is there's certain specific parts for each proposal. So when you're looking at this, the ballot, when you get into the ballot, you'll see that there's very, very specific things like, the floors and walls, the insulation levels are boosted just a little bit. And so you vote yes or no on that. And that's just, the way it works. So let's move on to the next slide. Okay, and so just some examples of important proposals. We can move on so that you know what to look for. So this is just one. This is at the top there. It says proposal CE 218. That's how they'll all be labeled, either CE for commercial or RE for residential. This is one that is fixing a problem that exists right now with section C406, which is a part of the code for the commercial code that was put in a few years ago. And as it currently exists, as you see on the left-hand side of the screen there, it says existing section C406 options, and builders have to choose one option. But based on where they are with the climate zone, where the building is located, and which option they choose, we can go to the next slide. PNNL, excuse me, the Pacific Northwest National Lab determines that they found that these are wildly different. So it's not an equitable choice there. Some places will save more energy and some will save less based on what type of building it is, based on where it's located, and based on which option the builder chose. So we put an X on the left-hand side there to say, okay, forget that. Let's redo section C406 and make it accurate to the building type, the climate zone, and what option they actually choose. And so this is an example of what it would look like now. So rather than just a simple table, it's a more detailed table. And so this is one that we want you to vote for, because this will actually make sure that it saves energy. So builders just have to get 10 points, and they can choose from the left-hand side there. There's a list of the different measures that they can choose. And then across the top there are the climate zones. So they choose which climate zone they're in. So if it was a climate zone 4C and they chose C406.3.1, which is a 10% improvement in the lighting power, if you scroll over, that's 14 points right in the middle there. So that would do it. They just choose that one thing, improve lighting power density, and then they get 14 points. So they've achieved it. So that's just one example. So we would say in our voting guide, vote for, it'll be green, CE 218. Let's go to the next slide. In the same way, RE 209 is the residential. We call this the flex points proposal. So it's flexible for builders, so they get to choose. And instead of choosing one specific measure, they choose a package. So there's a few different packages, and they have to get 5 points, and each point represents a 1% savings. So if we can pass this into the code, that's a 5% savings in energy efficiency right there. This is a really critical one that we want to get enough votes for. And we need to get 2/3 majority vote because one of the committee members voted the wrong way by accident at the committee action hearing. Who he later said, "I'm so sorry," but as it turned out, the vote was 6-5 against us. So now we need to get 2/3 majority to pass this. So we really need your votes for RE 209. Let's go to the next slide. And we'll go through these real quickly here. This is just to kind of give you an example of how we're looking at these. So for these pushing the building envelope, of course, the building envelope is the exterior walls and windows, and it's the change from indoor air to outdoor air. So the insulation in the walls, the window efficiencies, all of that is considered building envelopes. It's really important and critical to improve. A lot of these, like the improved insulation requirements there, you'll see there's a bunch of CE ones, and you don't have to memorize this again. It's all in the voting guide that we'll talk about in a minute. But these are insulation proposals that boost the efficiency. They are just a little bit improved, and it's also based on climate zone. So like climate zone 4 might have, you know, improved slab insulation by a little bit, and that would be one proposal. And then another one would be for ceiling insulation in different climate zones. So it's making them all consistent across the country based on the climate zone that they're in. And although, and some of the pushbacks and the complaints against these were that, oh, well, it doesn't save enough energy. But our point is that, well, if it does save energy, we've done the cost analysis on all of these. And if it is cost effective and it does save energy, yes, it's not a huge energy saver, but it's that little bit, it doesn't cost very much. If you're already in an attic spraying insulation, to add another 3.5 inches is actually cost effective. We're in our proposals that we've proposed here. Or analyze of other people's proposals. So it should be done. You know, we should maximize efficiency wherever we can. So we can go on to the next slide. Okay, so here's other ones that you'll see. There's providing data to building operations managers. Those are some of the commercial ones there, and better mechanical systems, CE 113 and 140. These are just, again, improving efficiency of the equipment. Or ventilation systems in the case of CE 140. We can just keep moving ahead here so we can get to questions. CE 162 is residential lighting energy use in multifamily buildings, and that just clarifies lighting controls for apartments, or lighting for apartments and condos in large multifamily buildings. We can scroll through, Nicole. CE 209 is one that improves lighting efficiency for indoor growing operations. In some areas, indoor agriculture is the fastest growing load on the grid. So this just assures that lighting is more energy efficient. This is a huge opportunity to save a lot of energy, just this one proposal, CE 209. Let's keep going. And then residential building efficiencies. These are some of the ones that you'll see in our voting guide. These are ones that improve insulation, like I talked about before, window performance, eliminating leaky duct work, making sure that the ducts are tested so that the duct systems that are carrying heated or cooled air through the building aren't leaking into the walls or to the exterior, making sure that they're tested. Lighting efficiency improvements and HERS index. Some of you may know about the HERS rating index. That's the score that goes from 0 to 100, and the higher the score is, the less efficient the building is. This is one compliance path that builders can choose. So there's different paths, meaning different ways that they can comply with the code. This is one. So we're trying to improve that so that we can push toward net zero sooner. So we want those scores to be improved. That's RE 182, 184, et cetera. And then there's electrification. So some beneficial electrification proposals that you'll be voting on will encourage, for example, RE 147, that'll just require that electrical circuits and receptacles are near gas-fired or propane-fired equipment so that in the future, if homeowners want to put in an electric water heater, for example, there'll be an outlet there. They won't have to have an electrician come in and rewire their house to get electricity there, which would be much more expensive, but there'll just be an outlet ready for them there. Let's go on. And in the same way, electric vehicles. This is a big one because electric vehicles are expected to grow so much. There's going to be so many more electric vehicles on the road, and making homes and commercial buildings electric vehicle ready is a really important thing for market transformation as we go forward. So this is preparing the market. We know that people are going to be buying more and more electric vehicles. So just making sure that there's an electric vehicle ready charger, or not charger, but just the wiring, just so that it's EV ready in the garage of new homes, or that certain parking spots are reserved for charging in commercial buildings. That will help save money. In a new home, there was one study that came out that showed for a new home, it would cost about $40 to make a garage EV ready with the wiring and the circuitry that's needed. But if you wanted to go back and have your garage rewired, it may cost upwards of $4,000. And then you've got permit fees on top of that, the hassle of getting a permit, and that might be $50 to $200 just for the permit fee. So it's much more expensive to later go in and retrofit, which is why in our proposals now we're getting these homes and buildings EV ready. Okay, next slide. And then there's some renewable proposals. So RE223 is an optional appendix in the code. So it would go in it's as an appendix. Jurisdiction could choose to adopt it or not. So jurisdictions that want to include renewable energy in their code, but they don't know how, and to try to get a group of people together and write that themselves would be much more time consuming and harder to do. So this is just the code language there ready for them. If they want to adopt it, they can. And that's only in states, of course, where local jurisdictions have the option of doing so. And then CE21 just fixes a definition of what is biomass-related renewable energy, so that virgin materials cannot be used. So this is just fixing a definition within the code. So these are renewable proposals that we have made recommendations on. You can go to the next slide, Nicole. Okay, and one other thing I wanted to say about the renewables. When we looked at the renewable proposals in the code this time, we really put energy efficiency. We looked at it with an eye for energy efficiency first, because we know that it's going to be more expensive, less cost effective to replace insulation, for example, or better windows with renewable energy. That just doesn't make sense. First, we want to maximize the energy efficiency and then add renewables. So any renewable proposals that we analyzed, we made sure to look at it with that eye. And so you'll see some in the voting guide that say vote for it, or some that say vote against it. And that's the way that we looked at the renewable proposals. So moving on to voting, we can go to the next slide. And Bill, do you want me to keep going here?
Let me take over just one, and then I'll wrap this up just to, and then we can turn to questions. The reason voting is important is, remember I mentioned earlier that the 2015 and the 2018 IECCs were flat in terms of improvements. And that's because we found out why that was. On the first day of the hearings on residential energy efficiency in Las Vegas, the New York Times put out an article that said that there was that the ICC had a structural impediment against efficiency, and that structural impediment had made it difficult to win the 2/3 majorities that we had to have in order to win pro-efficiency proposals. So basically what the New York Times told us is that we really do need those 400, actually we need the 550 votes cast. And we're asking each of you to take a look, to set aside 1 hour. And if you set aside 1 hour, and if a lot of people do that, we're going to have that 50 million ton reduction in carbon. And we're going to have a lot more money in people's wallets because of lower energy bills. And so I will tell you right off the bat, it's my hope that you spend an entire hour and vote on the comprehensive guides that EECC's put together. It's about 117 votes. But it's amazing, because I was talking to DOER and a number of other people who have voted before. The voting goes relatively easy. If you go on to you notice that earlier, I think it was Nicole that was showing you the voting, how it looks on the voting. You'll see 20 different proposals on a page. Fairly quick to be able, if you have the guide with you, to be able to click on those proposals that you want to vote on. and there won't be all of them, but we believe that you can do 100 votes in an hour. Just simply the way that if you open up that 20, that page with 20 proposals on it, there'll only be about 6 or 7 of those altogether, and it doesn't take that long to click on this. So really what we want you to do is spend the hour for the comprehensive proposals, but we also recognize that there are going to be time limitations. The most important thing you can do, and this is to make sure that you've voted on the third best use of your time, which is the highlighted proposals, and that's about 45 proposals, and those 45 proposals are the most impactful out of the 117. And so, bottom line is, we'd like you to take an hour. If you can only take a half hour, make sure that you voted on the blue highlighted proposals. And then there may be a few other proposals, I think, after discussing it with DOER that DOER will want you to vote on as well. Next slide. And you've seen this. I mean, but basically, the key is, how do you get to that page that has the 20 proposals on the screen? Well, you just do this. You log in, you go to the listing page, you go from there to, you find the 20 proposals per page, and then you use the ECC voting guide to select your choice on each one of them. Next slide. These are our voting guides, and you'll see on the left and right that one of them are commercial, and well, we have a commercial and we have a residential voting guide as well. Those are the long-term guides. Next slide. And this is the easy one. This is the ECC Priorities Voting Guide, just came out today, and you'll see that the blue highlighted areas are the ones that are the biggest energy savers, and that's the 50 million metric tons. The other proposals fall into other categories. Maria talked about a number of them. Some of them are future planning. Things like making sure that we're EV ready, or that we have the kind of space in terms for electrification down the road. Other things are verification items, and I think these are really important, because we know that if a builder is aware that they have to test the duct system that they put in, that they tend to do a better job of putting the duct system in. It's like, Professor, is this going to be on the final? Once we verify, if there's independent testing and independent verification, and duct testing is a good example of it, blower door testing is another one, and then just things that the builder has to do to verify later on, we know that they're going to do a better job of complying with the code that's out there. So those are the kinds of things. You can't really measure those, the benefit of duct testing or EV ready, but we know it's going to have an impact. And then the net zero proposal that she mentioned earlier, that is the RE, I think 223 that came from MBI, is going to have a tremendous impact on residential energy efficiency, net zero, and we can't estimate what the benefit is, because we don't know how many jurisdictions are going to adopt it, but it's really important, so that you get an idea of how we've prioritized our voting guide, and they all fall into those categories. And one last category, and you'll notice all that red that's on there, those are the proposals that have to be defeated. And if they, it's one thing, we don't want to take 2 steps forward and 1 step back because a couple of these proposals go through. So I hope you're going to spend the time on those disapproved proposals as well. Next slide. And this is where Maria's going to be. She could chime in too, but we're going to be there to help you. We have an online resources that you can go into. It's energyefficientcodes.org. It will be posting how to vote videos. Of course, you all are going to get that from the Boston City Council, and we're really excited about the way MCAN has done that with Councilor O'Malley. I think he's become a rock star in the code arena. But we're going to have first-time voter webinars, voter guides, those kinds of things that are out there. Next slide. And all you need to do is get in touch with us if you have any questions. And it's on the voting guide. Incidentally, on the voting guide, you're also going to see contacts with New Buildings Institute, the Natural Resources Defense Council, and the Institute for Market Transformation. That's because this time, for the very first time, we're very united in our policies. And so what you're going to see is you're going to see one voting guide from the efficiency community. And so we're going to make it easy for you. Thank you very much for your time, and we're open for questions.
Thank you so much, Bill and Maria. And that's a great segue to remind everyone that if you do have questions, feel free to type those into either the chat or the Q&A box. We'll keep a watch on both of those. So feel free now or in the next few minutes to input any questions that you have on anything we've talked about or anything that we haven't yet talked about. And while I was voicing that segue, it gave Nicole a chance to scroll back to the slide that made a very quick sneak peek preview before that somehow got out of place, but is one that we did want to share with you just now here at the end, kind of on getting out the vote and our next steps. So thank you again so much to Bill and Maria and all of our other partners on this effort. We are now getting down to that crunch time. We finally have our voting window. The voting guides are coming together. Everyone's going to go in and make sure that they have their login information, their PIN. They've tested that out. They can access the page on CDP Access. So everyone's getting ready. So the next couple things you can do, besides sharing this webinar, these slides, previous webinars or slides, other resources with your registered and validated voters, is to make sure they have a time to all come together and vote. Now, you don't have to come together and vote. You don't have to eat pizza, though you certainly can, and it might make it more fun, and it might make sure that everyone really does carve out that time. So what we recommend is for whether it's the primary representative and for a governmental member in your city or town, or one of the other voters, or otherwise someone who's just supporting and helping the effort, to block off time on the voters' calendars for a date between November 18th and December 5th, where they can come. Maybe it's a communal kind of meeting center in the community, or a space that fits enough people that for all of your voters, whether it's 4, 8, or 12, or several governmental members together, so a multiple of that, or maybe even folks from other towns. You can do it regionally, to come together, sit around laptops, because as Nicole mentioned early on, you need to have a computer that's connected to the internet in order to be able to vote. It'll be much easier if each of you has that laptop or that computer that you can sit at and vote, rather than trying to share it, everyone doing their votes, then pass it on to the next person. That would take much more time, and it'll be kind of fun and easier to do it all at the same time as well. You can have your voting guide in hand and kind of go through one by one. This is the next measure that we're voting on. Here's how we want to vote. And as Bill said, I think it'll actually be a pretty quick process. Once the learning curve is gotten over, which we think will be relatively quick, you might be able to power through quite a few of these. As Nicole also mentioned, the proposals will come up in numerical order, so that's how the voting guides will be listed as well. So you can just kind of go down the list. We have you through these voting guides not voting on every single proposal, though as Bill mentioned, you are definitely more than welcome to vote on every single proposal, but knowing that most of you may not have the time to do that, the voting guides will help you determine which, as you go down the list, that you want to spend your time voting on for that quick 10, 20 seconds to actually put in the vote as guided by the guide, as by the voting guide. You'll have, as Bill mentioned, 20 proposals on a page. And so as you go down them, you can be pretty quick in getting through quite a few on just a couple of pages. So if you're all sitting together and can kind of follow along with the guide, help each other troubleshoot if there's any questions, save as you go, you should be able to bang out the voting in a relatively quick amount of time. We think in definitely less than an hour. I would reserve at least an hour on folks' calendars if you're able to. That allows you to come in, get a piece of pizza, chat for a minute, make sure your computers are working and that you are able to log in. Build a little bit of a buffer so that if you are spending 40 to 45 minutes on the vote itself, you still can be out of there in less than an hour, even with that pizza eating and chatting and troubleshooting time. If you have more time than that and want to spend more time and can dedicate more time on other energy efficiency proposals, wonderful. If you can only spare that 45 minutes and you're going to get right to business, then that's doable too. And if you want to do it separately on your own, at your own computer, that works as well. But I think a number of communities really like this idea, and it's been successful in the past, so we definitely encourage it if possible. We also have on here, as you can see, and as Nicole mentioned earlier, we are planning an in-person workshop in the city of Newton. Much thanks to Ann Berwick for this idea and for hosting us at the library in Newton, and for allowing us to open it up to other communities. So if you are a registered voter in the city of Newton, please come. If you are a registered voter in an adjacent community or nearby or work in Newton or otherwise want to make the trek, please come. We'd like you to register because there are limited seats, but it's a relatively big space, so we can fit a good number of you. And the plan, it starts at 3 o'clock on Thursday, November 21st. And the plan, and that's a week from tomorrow, the plan is to spend the first hour or so getting everyone acquainted again with that voting portal, making sure everyone has their login, has their PIN, understands the voting guide, can talk through any proposal questions that they might have, and is really ready to go. At that point, at around 4, we welcome anyone to stay and actually vote altogether. So we hope that a lot of folks will do that. If some need to leave, but will be armed with the information that we get to go over from 3 to 4, that works. For those that can stay for all or most of the time to get all their voting done, great. And just a reminder too, as Nicole mentioned, you can save along the way. You don't and submit, but you have through December 5th to make sure if there's any changes you want to make or you didn't get through everything, or you go and do those 45 or so that are highlighted, but then have some extra time a little later in the voting window and want to go back and vote on, the next 15 or, another 45 because it was easy and you're glad to be able to have that impact, then you can go back in and vote on those others that you hadn't gotten to yet or change those votes. Make sure you save it and submit it by December 5th. And as long as the version you want is submitted by the end of that voting window, that is what will be registered with the Iecc. And Nicole showed you how you can go back in and just look to make sure your vote went through and was registered there. So with that, I think we'll move on now to any questions. Just a reminder to Rsvp, if you plan on joining us in Newton, so we can make sure that we have space for you. To that event too, and you'll see it on the Eventbrite page, we ask that you bring a laptop with you that can connect to the internet, and that you encourage other voters that you know to come join us there as well. Lastly, and I think we'll go to our page, maybe is it on the next slide, Nicole, about our resources? Oh yeah, sorry, to scroll back through since that one was strangely out of place. As we all kind of scramble here to get the voting guides now that the voting window has finally been set. Here we are. So our Codes for Climate webpage. Many of you are hopefully familiar with this. Again, we'll be sharing this recording. We'll be sharing the slides. In our emails that we've sent out, it includes all this information as well as the web pages as well. But on here, when you go visit it the next time, or check out one of our last emails that we sent out that had this information as well, you'll find these resources. Today's, once we get that up in the next couple of days and send that out, we'll be also including here other kinds of technical assistance that we can provide. So similarly to the voter validation period, you will have a chance to contact us throughout the window if you need help as you go or want to set up a time to talk more in depth. Nicole will have a lot of hours available in her calendar during that voting window. I will be available to help as well. If there's questions that you have, you heard from Bill and Maria how they are there for help as well. Other project partners throughout the state, I'm sure, will be providing support too. So there are a lot of us here that can help you as questions come up or concerns, or you need help with a certain part or want to spend some time together kind of going through part of the process. We'll be here to provide that, and our webpage will provide a lot of those resources so you can see how you go about attaining our help for that. One last note on the voting guide before we open it up to a few questions. As I mentioned in the preamble to Bill and Maria's presentations, we will be working with our state and local partners to put together a voting guide based essentially on the Iecc and their partners' voting guide localized here to Massachusetts, whereas Bill mentioned there might be a few additional proposals that we support you voting on. And for consistency, we'll make sure that that is true across all of our partners here locally. So as I mentioned, more on that very soon to come, but just again a reminder that we will have a localized version of the national voting guide for all of you to use during your voting. And if you have any questions on that as well, please feel free to contact us at any time. But be on the lookout for that in your email inboxes within the next few days. All right, so let's move on to questions. And I know we had one come up a little while ago now, after we went through that page, I think, with a map of all of our eligible voters. So this question is for you, Bill and Maria. If you happen to know, we think, 520 eligible voters here to vote on the IECC this year. Do you happen to have a sense nationwide how many we might have that are eligible to vote on this year's IECC?
Oh boy, so let me take a stab at that, Maria. What we did is we modeled 14 other areas of the country around what we all were able to do in Massachusetts. And so what we've done is tried to set up teams in those 14 other regions. For example, one region goes all the way from the Canadian border down to Ashland, Oregon, which is near the California border. And we tied in with a group called Zero, which is a zero energy building organization in Oregon, and then with Shift Zero, which is a kind of a sister organization in the state of Washington. We've had the King County Climate Collaborative. That's a lot of K's and C's, and they call it K4C. Is a big player in this, and mayors have gotten involved in as well, and they've signed up literally, dozens and hundreds of potential voters there as well. The state of Washington signed up 10 governmental memberships at 12 votes each, just the state of Washington. But we've seen similar kinds of responses in the cities as well. Multiple memberships, just like they have in Boston and a few other places. I mean, I was absolutely stunned when Worcester called and said, we're signing up we need to sign up our 10 governmental members. And I said, you mean your 10 governmental member voting representatives? They said, no, 10 governmental members. But we've had similar responses in Florida. We've in Denver. The Colorado group has been really outstanding. We've reached out to the local government commission which is kind of like the mayor's group in California. They have gotten very engaged, even though they have their own code. So even if they vote on the IECC, it's not going to affect them. But what they realize is that market transformation that will happen as the rest of the country becomes more like California and Massachusetts, that market transformation is going to bring down the cost of construction in both of those states. And so they're very active in this. So the ABAG, which is the Association of Bay Area Governments, is engaged. We've got, in addition to that, just jurisdictions all around the country. Some of them, and the other thing you need to think about is the fact that not only has the U.S. Conference of Mayors made this a huge issue, and there are 1,300 mayors, but the National League of Cities has done the same thing. And then all of a sudden, around the time that we were signing people up in March, Justin Gillis wrote a piece, an op-ed for the New York Times that got Mayor Bloomberg's attention. All of a sudden, Mayor Bloomberg, who leads the American City Climate Challenge, got in touch with Hillary Firestone on the staff of this ACCC and said, "Are we involved with the ECC?" And they said, "Yes, we are." And so the American Cities Climate Challenge has gotten involved. The Climate Mayors has gotten involved through the U.S. For the Urban Sustainability Directors Network. The Sierra Club, obviously, mostly in many states around the country have been very engaged. Texas and of course Massachusetts and state of Washington and others. And so we have I think the big turning point for a lot of mayors was not the issue of saving money at the for homeowners, although that was a driving force for a long time. But I think the United Nations determination that that we have an urgent situation prompted the unanimous passage of a resolution in Boston last year by the U.S. Conference of Mayors, recognizing that not only do we mayors support building efficiency, but we also support climate action, and let's marry those two and let's make the IECC a top priority for Wisconsin mayors. So that's a long answer to this, and it's kind of hard. I'm not really, I really don't like making predictions on votes, but I do think that we have literally potentially thousands of new potential voters all around the country, and we needed just 400. If we'd had the 400 in 2016, we would have been able to pass. We would have had a positive result on the 2018 IECC. So I'm excited about this. I've really seen, and again, this is a very. I often recommend that anybody that has insomnia should watch the code hearings, because they will put them to sleep without any question about it. But it is amazing how much of an impact they have, and really how important it is that we get our buildings right. So I'm sorry about the kind of droning on, but I've got to tell you, there's just a tremendous amount of excitement about this.
We are tremendously excited too, and Bill's gotten to see this kind of evolve over the years, and so that's, I think, really is the reason that he is so excited and so passionate about what we were able to potentially do this year, because of the growth that we've seen in the number of eligible voters. But Bill also made a really good point there at the end, in terms of not wanting to predict how many votes that then equals, because eligible voters does not necessarily mean that we have that many votes going through. So here's where the rubber hits the road. We need all of you that are validated voters to make sure you set aside this time and vote sometime between November 18th and December 5th. That's the only way that we can actually try to get enough votes to really allow the more energy efficient proposals to go through and get that at least 10% bump in our efficient building code, which is something we all know that we urgently need in this climate crisis. So a number of other questions have come in. I'm going to turn it to Nicole to go through some of them with y'all.
So first of all, we've gotten a lot of questions about the slides being available, the links on the slides, and things like that. So we'll both be posting the slides and the recording of this webinar on our website that we showed you here, that you can go through mepc.org, our work, Clean Energy, and get to this page that way as well. But
also just search for building codes or codes for climate on the mapc.org site.
Yeah, so we'll also be emailing out the slides and the recording to attendees and folks who have registered for this webinar but weren't able to make it. So you'll have all of that information through those mediums as well. We have a few good logistical questions about how to actually make sure you're in there and registered and set up to vote, and how to get your PIN. I do want to address another good question that we got about the optional nature of that pathway in the code. That's in one of the code proposals. And so the way that the IECC is formatted at the national level, that code proposal is framed as optional, even though in Massachusetts, as a state, individual municipalities aren't able to adopt individual codes on their own. We have the choice of the stretch energy code or the base code, but we don't have the ability to adopt individual code pathways on that scale. Having an optional code pathway codified through the national process, though, does give Massachusetts as a state more language to pull from when we make our state-specific amendments. And so as a state, we approve the International Energy Conservation Code every 3 years as it comes in, and we also have our state-specific amendments. So if Massachusetts were to put in one of those optional code pathways, we would do that at the state level, but that could be as part of the stretch code, so that would give municipalities an individual option to choose whether to adopt or not. But in general, we don't have the option to adopt at a municipal level those codes.
Just to add on there, Nicole, also, and just remember, folks, that 3/4 and more than 3/4 of the state cities and towns are stretch code communities. And so if you are a stretch code community, if we were to update the stretch code with that optional net zero pathway, or some other language that brought it to net zero, that would be something all of those more than 3/4 of the states, cities, and towns would thereby have as their stretch code. They would also always have the option to rescind that stretch code and opt out of it, but it wouldn't be something they would then need to choose to opt back into. Stretch code communities would stay stretch code communities. All that being said, that's hypothetical and down the line, but as Nicole said, it gives the state some potential language to draw from as they're looking at those amendments. And just a reminder, too, that the amendments that DER works on, along with our Board of Building Regulation and Standards, have to be more energy efficient, more stringent amendments to the International Energy Conservation Code. They cannot be ones that diminish the International Energy Conservation Code. So as the state goes about doing that with the 2021 IECC, having that language codified, as Nicole said, would be a real advantage. It does live as an appendix, or would live as an appendix in the code, so it would be an option in that way for any jurisdiction, as Maria had mentioned, across the country. So something, too, to keep in mind, just as California has many voters looking to support the IECC and the most energy efficient provisions in it, this time around, even though California has its own code and does not follow the IECC, as they see the impact and the advantage of having so many other jurisdictions and states throughout the country be advanced through the IECC process. And so with that in mind also, by voting on that optional appendix for net zero, it allows us to support many other jurisdictions throughout the country in potentially adopting that language. And this is something that we need to work on collectively across the United States and much farther beyond, too. Nicole, do you want to address any of those more logistical questions? They're also in our earlier slides, so as we send out those resources, folks can always go back and listen to as well as utilize those slides.
Yeah, so there's 3 important topics that have come through this question. So one is, how do you make sure that you have been validated as a voter and are registered to vote? So the easiest way to do that would be to talk to the primary representative for your group, and since they're the ones that did that voter validation, we can also walk through those steps of logging in and do that check in CDP Access in that portal to see that you are eligible to vote inside your account information. We've also had questions about how to get a PIN if you haven't gotten that email from ICC. And we know that a lot of voter validations went through at the same time this year, and they were a little overwhelmed. So we know that most folks did not get that email. So if you don't have that email directly from ICC, I would, again, if you're not a primary representative, check in with your primary representative to make sure that you're using going to use the same email, but then go through those steps of logging into the ICC website and then CDP Access, because you should be able to set up your PIN through that initial sign-up process.
And those slides, again, are in this slide deck, which we will send out, as well as our previous webinar from October, which is already on our website and in the last emails we sent out. There are slides in there as well that walk you through the login process, as well as the PIN setup and PIN retrieval process.
Yeah, and if you do run into issues with that, let us know or let ICC know. But if you let us know and we get a lot of the same questions, we can ask ICC once and make it go a little bit faster. So please let us know if you run into issues with getting the PIN. And then we had a great question about the process towards the end of voting and how you know whether you've submitted the vote and what your final vote will be. And so I wanted Bill or Maria to walk through that part of it again. And so the question is, during the voting window, when you hit submit, does that mean that that's your final vote, or can you still edit what you've submitted during that voting window?
Yeah, this is Maria. You can, once you hit submit, you can always, even if you get out of voting, you can always go back in. You can log back in and change your votes right up through December 5th when voting ends. So there's that. And then there's also a place within there where you can check your votes. Once you're in, I think you'll be able to see this. It'll be self-explanatory, but you'll be able to see what you voted on and how you voted to confirm that all your votes went through. And of course, you could always log out and log back in and then check to see you could go back in there and see how did I vote and know for sure that your votes were cast. So I hope that answers the question.
Well, it's been a
Great,
tough
thanks, Maria.
question for
Go
us
ahead, Bill.
because it's been a tough question for us because we've never voted. And so we tend to call Ian Finlayson and at DOER and other people who have voted, but Maria's answer is correct. I think there's a way to verify. I mean that your votes have been cast and it'll be available on the line. And I think one of the things that Commissioner O'Malley may show us is exactly how that happens.
And you know, the other thing that we forgot to mention is that ICC is planning to do some how to vote webinars and actually have screenshots of where to go and how to use the CDP access. And those are supposed to happen, I think, the first and second day of voting. So it should be the 18th and 19th. I think they're going to do 2 different videos. So as soon as those are available, that might be helpful to you as well. And we'll have a link to that from our website, and we can send that to you guys so you can put it on yours too.
That's great. We'll definitely do that. Thank you for that reminder, Maria. And you mentioned, or I think Bill did, Councilor O'Malley too. So as Bill had mentioned earlier, and as some of you may have seen in the earlier links that we provided in the voter validation or registration portions of this process over the last year, MCAN has worked with Boston City Councilor Matt O'Malley to provide those how-to videos. And they will be doing so again. So on the first day of voting on Monday the 18th, they will film or record Councilor O'Malley voting and going through that process. And they'll share that, we'll share that then on their behalf with all of our stakeholders. So that's going to be a really helpful guide too. So you can see, in real time with a local counselor kind of going through the process, what it looks like on a video. So we look forward to sharing that. I think that too will kind of assuage some fears in terms of just the uncertainty of what to expect once you get into the portal. I think that might bring us to time. So I just want to thank everyone so much for your attendance and participation today, as well as in all the months leading up to this. We are almost there. Plan your pizza party, set aside your time, make sure you have your logins and your pins. Let us know if you have any questions. We'll be sending out the voting guides within the next few days, and we look forward to helping you all get these votes in between November 18th and December 5th. Thank you again to our presenters, and have a great rest of your day.